Hello and welcome back to the Three-Handed Bandits channel. It's Nathan and Aiden back with another video for you today. And today we're going to be reacting to a wild week 3 of NFL football. And we're going to be giving you our updated power rankings heading forward. Just a quick reminder that these power rankings are kind of how likely we think a team is to kind of win a Super Bowl. So just because a team beat another team does not mean they're going to be higher in our power rankings. But before we get into all of that, please go ahead and like and subscribe and share this video with somebody that you care about. What did you think of this wild week of NFL football, Aiden?
Very awesome wins from teams that needed them. Basically, these teams that are counted out win these against tough matchups for everyone. Most of them, I think, at least 3 games that they were heavy underdogs winning. So I'm glad to see them get that win in that column they needed.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of parity in the NFL very early on into this season. And we'll just go ahead and get right into the rankings. We'll start at the very bottom of the totem pole. The Chicago Bears. I'm tempted to put Georgia in the number 32 spot, if I'm being honest. Because honestly, I think the Georgia Bulldogs could take on the Chicago Bears in their current state. Just we've had them last, basically every single week since week 1, and they've not really done anything to prove to us that they aren't the worst team in football. Justin Fields is not an NFL quarterback. The offensive line is bad. The play calling is bad. The coaching is bad. The defense is a mess. Just there's not a single thing about this organization that is going right. And if it continues this path, then sooner rather than later, we're going to start seeing Georgia Bulldogs as a 32 ranked team in the National Football League. And the next up, we're going to be talking about the number 31 team, the Denver Broncos. Are going to be falling after an absolutely abysmal performance against the Miami Dolphins. This was a college scoreline, 70-20. That just does not happen in the NFL. And you have to be dinged for that. Just one of my main concerns for this Broncos team from last year was losing Ejiro Evero, their defensive coordinator. And this defense is just horrible. The offense isn't even as bad as it was last year, but this year the defense, I don't think they could stop me. You know what I mean? So it's just been a big mess. What have you been seeing from this Broncos team early in the season?
I mean, when you get beat 70-20, it's almost unexcusable. You're supposed to be professionals here. At this point, I don't know if I'd rather see. It's like watching them getting beat up by a practice squad. Dude, it is absurd of how much of a downgrade they win. I'm not saying that it's all Sean Payton's fault. He did come into a already dying organization and they're trying to rebuild, so it's hard to start from the ground up, but they've hit rock bottom. They are at rock bottom. If they get worse than the Bears, something needs to change big time. Possible move, something, because this is not what they wanted at the beginning of the year, and it's all hell for them right now.
Yeah, and then Sean Payton's really looking like the Kevin James version of himself from that movie. But this week, our bottom 2 teams, the Denver Broncos and the Chicago Bears, are facing off. So whoever ends up winning that game is going to be the 31st ranked team. But it's just, this is an all-time generational horrible game to watch, and I'm not looking forward to it. The next team, and this is going to be kind of capping off this bottom tier. There's only 3 teams in this bottom tier of true top pick contenders. It's going to be the Carolina Panthers, who had a decent day on offense with Andy Dalton. Early in the year, Bryce Young hasn't looked good, and then Andy Dalton came in and was serviceable, but, while I do think Andy Dalton is one of the top 32 best quarterbacks in the league, this team just does have so many holes. There's not a whole lot of receiving talent. And the offense overall is kind of just underwhelming. And then the defense, which has been good the last 2 weeks, just got punched in the mouth. And, when your defense is supposed to be your calling card and your defense doesn't play well, you're just not going to be, you're not going to have a whole lot of wins. And I just don't know how high of a ceiling this team has for this season, at least. I think looking forward, you feel good about the defense, but in this season, it's not a whole lot to be optimistic on the offensive side of the ball. So that's kind of our cellar dweller tier. The next kind of cluster of teams we're going to have is going to be teams that are kind of bad and probably not going to like really be competing for the playoffs, but aren't like embarrassing cellar dweller teams. And so we're going to start off with the 29th ranked Washington Commanders. The first 2 weeks they went against Arizona and Denver, who, I mean, are some of the bottom teams in the league. They're able to win those games. And then they go against a real team in Buffalo and just get absolutely battered. It's definitely Sam Howell's worst game. And, at some point you have to face real NFL teams, and they haven't really had to yet. And when they finally do, they get their ass kicked. So I'm just not really expecting much from this team. Did you see anything from the Commanders that gives you any kind of hope for this year?
Not really much. They looked better than the Panthers, Broncos, and Bears. But I mean, it's not something to be boasting about. But that's like when they're going against a crazy offensive unit in the Bills, it is hard to keep up with them with Sam Howell as quarterback. I'm not saying that he's terrible. He needs a lot work done if he wants to continue to be a starting quarterback in this league.
For sure. So the next team is going to be the 28th Houston Texans, who are going to be rising 3 spots. CJ Stroud he's looked like an NFL starting caliber quarterback. Hasn't been perfect, but I mean, he just hasn't made a whole lot of mistakes. He's playing with anticipation, which a lot of rookies don't do. His former Ohio State counterpart, Justin Fields, hasn't learned how to play with that, for example. And so overall, I do think you feel good about the Texans. Like, the offense has been good. The defense had their best week, and they fucking went into Jacksonville, punched Trevor Lawrence in the mouth, and they dominated that game. And so, while I had them ranked kind of low early, like, they aren't one of the bottom 3 teams in the league. Like, I think they've shown enough to be ranked better than at least 4 other teams. You know what I mean? Like, they've looked pretty solid. And then the next team is going to be the Indianapolis Colts, rising 2 spots. What did you see from the Colts in their win over the Ravens?
Even without Anthony Richardson, Gardner Minshew did a solid, serviceable job for him. Their defense looks solid, even against, like, supposedly one of the best quarterbacks in the league. And they did really well against him. I was very, very surprised in the matchup. I thought it was good. I thought it was going to be, in my opinion, be a little higher scoring of a game. But the way the Colts played, they came in prepared for the Ravens. The Ravens did not look prepared. They thought they could just brush over the Colts, and that's kind of what happened. The Colts came to play, and if they do that every week, they'll keep rising.
Yeah, no, the Colts defense, at least the front 7 for sure, is legit. Well, I do think they got lucky on a really egregious missed pass interference in overtime to end up kicking the game-winning field goal in overtime. I mean, they still were fighting and gave themselves a chance, and, can't cry over spilt milk, and they won the game, and they deserved it. The next team, a really big riser this week, the Arizona Cardinals, moving up 4 spots. So when we originally ranked the Cardinals, a lot of people just had them as dead last, and we had a little bit more faith. But even then, they've still surpassed what we expected. This defense is legit, and they're playing hard for Jonathan Gannon. Drew Petzing, their offensive coordinator, is also doing a really good job. And then Joshua Dobbs is on this like Ryan Tannehill, like Geno Smith-esque arc where he's playing really, really good. Now, I don't think he's playing good enough to where when Kyler Murray comes back, you're going to, let him keep playing. But, I mean, he's played really, really well. And, they lost 2 tough games where they were competitive. But then they, against Dallas, just out-physicaled them, wanted it more, and they got the win that they deserved. And so stock is definitely up for the Arizona Cardinals. And I wouldn't be surprised if they actually end up keep going higher on the list, especially when a Kyler Murray does come back from injury. The next team is going to be the Las Vegas Raiders, who don't move at all. They're staying in the exact same spot again, because I think we had a pretty good read on this team so far. What have you seen from the Raiders so far?
Looking at the Raiders, I mean, obviously defensive-wise, I'm not really seeing much of hope. But offensively, like, you have guys like Josh Jacobs and Devontae Adams, you're going to produce. And the big question mark for me right now is going to be Garoppolo. Right now, I know it's concussion protocol. I mean, he's going to be out possibly 1 week, and that could change a little bit. But with him and his age, I mean, concussion protocol could go a little farther for him. I don't know. It really depends on how fast he gets back for this offense can really produce to give them the chance to win games. So I'm too stagnant to drop them down any lower or rise them up just because of that.
Yeah, the defense definitely has not looked great. And offense, last year this running game was insane, and this year they have not been able to run the ball at all. And so imagine if they're able to get that going again, like it's going to look like a lot more serviceable of an offense. But Jimmy Garoppolo is what he is. He's a very baseline starter. He's a little bit mistake prone, and he has injury concerns. And like just everything that we've said about this team has kind of shown up. Like this is just an okay team. Next up, we're going to be talking about the New York Jets. We're going to be falling 3 more spots. While this defense is really good, this offense just isn't good at all. And unfortunately, obviously they lost Aaron Rodgers, and that really derailed their season. Because this defense looks legit, and they had Aaron Rodgers. I have no doubt they'd be a top 10-ish team, but fortunately, Zach Wilson just needs more time to learn the game. And, until that happens, there's no reason for the Jets to be ranked any higher than this. And the next up, the top of this kind of tier of middling, kind of bottom tier teams is the LA Rams. Week 1 against Seattle, they really came in, shocked some people. And they were somewhat competitive against the Niners. But their offense just looked really poor against the Bengals. And I think they are who we thought they were. You know what I mean? So overall, I do think that they're going to have a fine, adequate season. I don't think they're going to be like a true, first overall pick contender. But, they're definitely not going to be able to compete against some of the real teams in the NFL. And so the next tier we have, these are going to be kind of like goodish, kind of week to week, kind of, might somewhat be competing to make the playoffs. Will probably end up falling just short. And that's going to start off with the Atlanta Falcons. What have you seen from Desmond Ridder and the Falcons thus far this season?
Watching it last week, Desmond Ridder, I saw sparks of hope. And then this week, it was the exact opposite. I am not confident in him as a quarterback. Him alone is hurting this offense. If they had any other guy in this position, they would be a way more serviceable team. They'd be higher in the rankings. He's really the key factor of why they are so low, because their run game's fantastic. That 1-2 combo is fantastic. Their defense is solid, and just your general on the field when it's supposed to be someone that you look up to. I don't look up to Desmond Ridder. I don't think, in all honesty, many people do on this offense to begin with. If they had someone that they know that can come in, they can make that game-winning drive or something like that, they'd be able to band around him and win. And it looks as if they're not doing that because he's not very good.
Yeah, there's definitely just something fundamentally wrong with this team. I think they've done a really good job of creating a really great running game, but there's something wrong with Arthur Smith. You're going against Detroit, and you have Bijan Robinson, who's looking like a top 5 running back, and you give him 10 carries, and you're trying to have Desmond Ridder win this game through the air, which is just not what this team should be doing. And so I think they're going to be just a little bit week to week. They'll have serviceable defense, and sometimes this offense will have good weeks, and sometimes they won't. And this week they didn't have a good offense, and so that's why they're lost. And so they're just going to move just because I do have a little bit more faith than some of the teams below them, but they didn't do anything to prove to me that they should rise in our rankings. And the next up is going to be my Tennessee Titans, dropping down 4 spots. And this might be one of the most matchup-dependent teams in the NFL. Well, I do think this defense is pretty good. It's pretty solid. This offense it's just bad, and that's because of the offensive line. This offensive line is the worst offensive line in the league, or at least one of the bottom handful. And because of that, they're so matchup dependent. So when they go against a team like Cleveland or the Saints, who have solid defensive lines, they're not going to be able to do much. But then we saw them go against the Chargers, who they were able to out physical and move the ball. And so it's just going to be a whole lot of this. Depending on who they go against will determine if they're going to be able to win or not. And fortunately, Cleveland and this defensive line was just able to completely dominate this game. And the next up is going to be the New York Giants, despite a tough loss, rising 3 spots. At the beginning of the season, If you told the Giants that they go against the Cowboys, the Cardinals, and the 49ers and they'd be 1-2, I think most Giants fans would have expected that. Like, let's be honest. Obviously, they've looked a little bit bad, but I think once they stop going against some of the top, 3 defenses in the NFL, then this offense will kind of start looking better. And, maybe it's just blind kind of faith in Brian Daboll on this team, but I think they're going to start picking things up and kind of getting back to being a solid team. But I mean, they've gone against the Niners and the Cowboys, who last week were 1-2 on our rankings. They have 2 losses. You know what I mean? Like, I think this team, I don't think we need to panic about this team just yet. And then next up, number 19 is going to be your New Orleans Saints dropping a spot. What have you been seeing from your Saints thus far?
I mean, with Derek Carr, that first half and the first 3 quarters, they looked solid. Defensively, they were stopping the Packers. They were really doing well. And then right at that injury, or like when he went down, it wasn't anything. It was something scary. He got thrown down, landed on his shoulder, couldn't protect himself. That's kind of an oh crap moment. I think everyone on the team felt it, and it kind of dropped their spirits. And then they were like, oh, we're up 17-0. We can brush off the rest of the game. But the Packers thought otherwise. I mean, yes, the Saints did miss that possible game-winning field goal with the minute left. But the way the defense is looking, I really have a feeling that the Packers could have drove down the field and hit that field goal to win it anyway, the way they were looking at that second half. I think it was just that defense looked like they lost heart a little bit, mixed in with, we're up 17-0 kind of mixture. So I feel like they're a better team if they're in the game, like it's within one score, for them to stay within mindset wise, because they were up too much and they kind of just lost it and couldn't get back to it. So other than like losing Derek Carr, I'm kind of a question mark on Winston. The defense in the first half, if you cut and paste the first half of this team, they are a solid team. The scary part is they did play that second half, so we will see.
Yeah, I think, if Derek Carr stays healthy this game, they probably go on to win. This is definitely Derek Carr's best game as a Saint thus far. But, NFL game is 4 quarters. You do have to play all 4 quarters. And if a team scores 18 unanswered and you blow a 17-point lead, like, there's going to be some questions asked. And so that's kind of, they're mainly dropping a spot because some other teams rised above them. But, with Derek Carr, whether it's week to week or he misses a game or some time, like, I think this team is going to struggle without him. Even, if he does end up playing, not a fully healthy Derek Carr could still be a bit of an issue. And so the next up is going to be the Tampa Bay Buccaneers dropping a couple of spots. I think they've looked solid, at least week 1 and week 2, they look solid. And I was kind of expecting the Eagles defensive line to really take advantage of this week, Buccaneers offensive line, but not quite as bad as it was. Like, this Buccaneers offense just was not able to do a whole lot. And so I think the Buccaneers kind of deserve to be in this tier, with the Saints and the Giants, of these kind of matchup dependent, kind of week to week teams who, I think if the Buccaneers and the Saints weren't in the NFC South, they would probably just be missing out on the playoffs. But, one of these 2 teams is going to win this division. And right now it's going to be, we still have the Buccaneers above, just with Derek Carr, possibly missing some time. The next team, and the final team in this tier, is going to be the Green Bay Packers, rising 7 spots, our biggest risers of the week. Like, they've just been good. Like, Jordan Love has been a good quarterback. He's been one of the top, 16 quarterbacks in the league. And they were able to come back and beat the Saints with, I think Bakhtiari and Jenkins and Watson and Jones. Like, they had a bunch of people out, and it shows a lot of heart to come back down 17-0 in the fourth quarter, like missing half your team. So imagine when everybody's healthy, like, this team is going to be pretty solid. And the more comfortable Jordan Love looks or gets, like, it's going to be a solid offense and solid team in general. And so that's why they're going to be ranking 17th. And now we're getting to the halfway point. Pittsburgh Steelers rising 3 spots. Week 1, their defense looked really bad. But the last 2 weeks, this defense has looked insane. What have you seen from the Steelers?
Honestly, what's holding them up, like you said, is their defense. I mean, when it came to Kenny Pickett, he's starting making the ball roll a little bit more. But the one thing on this team that scares me the most is this run game. What's holding them back is Najee Harris in the backfield. He does not look like what he used to be that very first year. It's tough to watch them attempt to run the ball. I remember seeing one clip. It looked like Najee Harris was running in slow motion. Like, it was so weird to watch. He had a 10-yard run. And I swear to God, it lasted like a whole minute. That's what it felt like. It was kind of crazy.
Yeah, this offense has looked bad. Matt Canada is not an offensive mind or a great offensive mind. The offensive line's bad. Najee Harris looks slow. It's kind of just a bit of a mess. And so, yeah, I mean, this is kind of just the formula for the Steelers is play good defense and hopefully just get good enough results on offense. And, you know, it's kind of what's going to happen there at the beginning of this tier of kind of playoff verge, kind of playoff threatening teams. So next up is going to be the Cleveland Browns rising a spot. This offense, you know, isn't great. And, you know, I did predict the Browns to win. This offense did look a little bit better than I expected, but I do think this offense is a little bit week to week. Deshaun Watson still has not looked great, but this defense is insane. Like Myles Garrett, Dalvin Tomlinson, and Zadarius Smith all on the defensive line is absolutely terrifying to have to scheme up and worry about as an offensive coordinator. And so I think they're going to be just a good, solid team that's able to play good defense and hopefully just do enough on offense to win. And now we're going to be talking about number 14th ranked Jacksonville Jaguars dropping 3 spots. Time for me to go on a fucking rant. I've been saying, and I got a lot of heat for it, for saying the Jacksonville Jaguars were overrated. And through 3 weeks, they've looked poor. You know, they almost lost to the Colts. The Texans kicked their ass, and Kansas City just completely dominated them. This defense isn't good. It hasn't been good. And it was just overhyped. You know, it was not a good unit. And you talk about the offense, who the offensive line is poor. Calvin Ridley had a good week 1, but it's been non-existent the last 2 weeks. And then Trevor Lawrence hasn't been looking that great either. So it's just, if they did not win the game against the Chargers last year in the playoffs, this team would have 0 expectations. But they got all this hype that was unwarranted. You know, Calvin Ridley hasn't played football in 2 years. He's not going to come in and suddenly be a star. Trevor Lawrence is Kirk Cousins. Like, he's a fine quarterback. But when you have bad offensive line play and a defense that couldn't stop me and you, you're not going to win a whole lot of games. And so I know it's only 3 weeks in the season, but I'm ready to proclaim I was right about the Jacksonville Jaguars. Now, they're probably going to find a way to win this division because the AFC South is so poor. But I would be surprised if Jacksonville gets past the first round of the playoffs. That's if they even make it. You know, the Colts and Texans are definitely rising. There's a legit possibility where the Jacksonville Jaguars could miss out in the playoffs to either of those 2 teams. So overall, stock way down on the Jaguars. And I'm ready to say I was right about them. So next up, we're going to talk about the Minnesota Vikings rising 1 spot after falling down to 0-3. What have you seen from the Vikings?
With them rising 1 spot, it's not because, like, the 0-3 record, obviously, it's a big hinder over them, but it's just because the Jaguars dropped below them, basically. That the spot moving up was because of them. But honestly, offensively, this team has looked very, very solid. Like, they could have won this game if Kirk Cousins would have spiked the ball and they regrouped, basically, and made a good, standable play. This play was so hectic, they wasted almost 10 seconds of standing around waiting for Kirk Cousins to call a play, and a catch that was a little outside away from Hawkinson that he kind of flicked with his fingers, went flying, and was luckily caught by a Charger. So it was more of just a luck base. I mean, I honestly think, in all honesty, that the Vikings lost this game, not the Chargers winning it. It was them shooting themselves in the foot in that last play because the Chargers hurt themselves. Basically, they gave the Vikings that position to score there, and they got lucky. So that's why I'm still up on the Vikings. If that defense just like comes around and starts making some types of stops, any type of stop, the offense can come in and win the game for them.
And yeah, and another thing about the Vikings is obviously the defense hasn't been great, but they've also been put in some bad spots just because the Vikings have had an insane amount of turnover bad luck with all these fumbles and shit. Like, I think they lost like 7 fumbles in 6 quarters of football. And so while they're 0-3, like their offense has played good and they just need to hold on to the damn ball. And once they do that, which, turnovers are fluky, there's just a random variance of turnovers. So they're able to kind of cut that out. There's no reason that this team is, going to keep losing games.
Last year they were almost like 11-0 in one-score games. It has just flipped on them. Basically, they are losing the close games. They are now 0-3 in these in the one-score games.
And I remember I made a little spreadsheet kind of tracking that. And while some teams do have regression in kind of their their one-score games, that's also just one of those things where it's just because you do have that flip doesn't mean you still can't be a good team. You know what I mean? Like there's some teams who I remember I was looking through the entire spreadsheet. I don't have it pulled up, but there's one team, I think it was like the Chargers in like 2017, had a losing record in one-score games, but still had like 10 or 11 wins. You know what I mean? So even with that happening, they could still rebound. They just need to stop turning over the goddamn ball. And once they do that, this team will be fine. But I remember there was somebody who commented on one of our videos about the Vikings and said something about hopefully they don't turn over the ball or fumble the ball. Like hopefully they can hold on to the ball. And I responded to that. And literally the first drive or second drive, I think it was Alexander Mattison or TJ Hawkinson, one of them fumbled the ball. So I responded to him and I was like, well, that didn't last very long. So as long as this team can hold on to the ball, they will be just fine. And so then moving up to the last team in this kind of good, not great tier, it's the New England Patriots. They've been competitive, looked really solid, and competed against some really good teams. And they finally got their win. This team is exactly what I thought they are. I projected a score of 15-11, and I projected a safety, and it was 15-10, and there was a safety. Like I literally know exactly what this team is. They're a good team. And, they lost a tough one against the Dolphins and Eagles, who are two of the top, 5-ish teams in the league. And so I think the New England Patriots are going to be solid. And come week 17, 18, they're going to be in the hunt for the playoff picture. Whether or not they make it will be determined, but they're going to be right around kind of the playoff, fringe. And so now we're going to be moving on to our next tier. And so there's only 3 teams in this tier of this kind of like, they're definitely not like Super Bowl threats, but also I feel a little bit better about them than kind of like the Patriots, Vikings, and Jaguars. So it's this weird little tier of these 3 teams. We're going to start off with the Seattle Seahawks, rising up 2 spots. The Seahawks had a poor week 1, but the last 2 weeks, this offense is really getting back to looking explosive. The defense is doing just enough. And so, I mean, they're consistently dropping 30 points. It's going to be hard to lose, games in the National Football League. And so I do feel pretty good about them rising. What have you seen from Seattle?
I completely agree. Their offense is looking way better than they did week 1. If they keep the ball rolling, they will win good games. And the big question mark is what's going to hurt them throughout the year is going to be the defense. If the defensive line can really pressure the opposing quarterback and cause some havoc, then it'll give this above average defensive back room able to make these plays. And if they can do that, they'll win games and make the playoffs and possibly go farther. We'll see.
Yeah, no, I feel good about the Seahawks making the playoffs, but I don't see them competing to win a Super Bowl or making the Super Bowl. But also, I don't think they're quite as flawed as like the Vikings, for example. And then next up, number 10, top 10 team, Chargers are staying in the exact same spot. I think ultimately, if you're a Chargers fan, I honestly feel like you might have wanted to lose this game so Brandon Staley gets fired. But, the Chargers and the Vikings the last couple of seasons have been the 2 teams that just find the most random, weird-ass ways to lose football games. And somehow the Vikings Viking harder than the Chargers chargered. You know what I mean? And so they found a way to squeak this one out. But overall, like, they have an explosive offense, but Brandon Staley's just not doing a good enough job with his defense. But, I mean, when you have Herbert and Keenan Allen, doing what they're doing, you're going to have a good team. And then number 9, also not moving a spot, Detroit Lions took care of business against the Falcons. What have you seen from them thus far?
They did exactly what they needed to do. I mean, yes, the Falcons didn't give the ball to their playmaker, but they disrupted Ritter more like exactly what they had to do. What I said in the last video was the way for the Falcons to win is for Desmond Ritter to play good ball, and he played terrible, and they lost. It happens. The Lions offensively looked awesome. It's the defense is what I'm like scared about the most. There's a lot of miscues in this defense. A lot of times where I'm like, oh, this guy's open, but lucky enough, Desmond Ritter didn't throw the ball to him. So like that, to where they're getting a little bit luckier defensive wise. But if they keep the ball rolling and keep getting better week to week, they could be scary down the road.
For sure. And so now we're into our kind of top tier of 8 teams. It's kind of like a 1A, 1B. So like the top 4, I think, are true Super Bowl like threats, like favorites. And then the 8 through 5 spots kind of like I could see them winning a Super Bowl, but not quite as much face. So this is kind of like one big tier with a little tier gap in the middle. In the number 8 spot, despite winning, it's going to be the Bengals dropping down a spot. You know, Joe Burrow does not have the strongest arm in the NFL. And so when he has his aggravated calf, he really can't, plant and drive the ball like he really needs to. Like Mahomes and Allen can, casually falling backwards, launch the ball a billion yards. You know what I mean? But Joe Burrow needs to have his feet set and really have a solid base to drive off to get the ball down the field. And he hasn't been able to do that. And so this offense has been poor. What was the stat? He was 1 of 15 on passes over 20 yards or something like that.
Yeah, it was. Passes over 20 yards this season and 1 of 15, and that's pretty bad. I mean, they weren't even accurate at all. They were overthrown 5 yards. He was just chunking them down and hoping that it would get to his receivers. It was a scary sight to see, even with the receiving still dropping a lot of balls, mostly T. Higgins. He did not have a great game. And when you're like 1A receiver is dropping this many balls, it's hard for their offense to do anything because you can't just throw the ball to Demar, even though that's what they did and they won. But with going against better defenses, you'll struggle by just throwing the ball to the one good receiver you have. You have to spread the love. And that's what I hope they could do down the road.
Yeah, so not only has Burrow not been great, his offensive line has also been poor too. And so I imagine, give this team a couple of weeks, really towards the end of the year, I think we'll be feeling better about them. But for how they've played through the first 3 weeks, they just have to drop. And so the next up, number 7 team is going to be the Bills rising up a spot. The last 2 weeks, they've looked really good. Granted, it's been against, 2 of the bottom 10 teams in the league. And so I want to see kind of how they go against a real team again because, they went against the Jets and Josh Allen looked horrible. This team, I think, is a good regular season team, but I still think they're flawed, and I think those flaws have shown. Gabe Davis is super, super week to week. And Josh Allen he's almost like a souped up Tony Romo, or kind of like a Brett Favre, where he's a great quarterback. He's a gunslinger, but he's going to make mistakes. He made mistakes in this game against Washington. Obviously, they were not punished in the slightest because their defense was able to kind of recover. But I just don't know if I really can see this team knocking off like the Dolphins or the Chiefs, to get to the Super Bowl. But, I mean, they're definitely in this kind of top cluster of really good teams in the NFL. And the next up is going to be the Baltimore Ravens dropping a spot after losing to the Colts. The Colts defense was really good and really limited them. But, through 3 weeks, Baltimore's probably been the best team in this division. The offense has been good for the most part. The defense has looked solid for the most part. And I do think they'll kind of get back to rolling as the season goes on. And then the number 5 team is going to be Dallas, dropping down 3 spots. We both hate Mike McCarthy, and I think he's part of the reason that they lost this game. They just came out, got punched in the face, and Arizona dominated them. So what are you feeling about the Cowboys post this loss to the Cardinals?
I think for them, they need to really bounce back. This next game, this week 4 game, is going to be whether or not they stay a contender in my mind. If they have to, whoever they're going against, they have to dominate offensively and defensively to get back to that pedestal that they've been on after these first 2 weeks because they played like crap. I mean, the Cardinals, they played tough and gritty, and they just weren't expecting it. I think the Cowboys expected them just to get an easy win and blow through them, and they weren't prepared, and the Cardinals punched them in the mouth. And they kind of need this wake-up call. The Cowboys, on paper, have one of the best rosters, one of the best. But like you said, I hate Mike McCarthy. It showed. It showed offensively. It was just a terrible offensive game for them. Defensively, I mean, you can only do so much when the Cardinals were like, oh, shit, we can win this game. And they kept rolling and kept going and going. And then everyone started losing spirits in the Cowboys, and they couldn't come back. They couldn't do anything about it. So they deserved to be dropped down 3 spots. In my opinion, they should be dropped down even more just for the fact of they lost to the Cardinals. But we will see how they do in the future.
Yeah, and there's a lot of teams like I can't imagine the 49ers or the Chiefs or even like someone like the Lions like just getting punched in the face and just not having a response to it like this Cowboys team did in this game. And yeah, they deserve to drop. This defense had their worst game, but also this offense has yet to look great for how much talent they have. Dak has just not been good enough. And, pair that with Mike McCarthy, it's not a great recipe to win a Super Bowl. So now we get to our kind of top 4 tier. I think one of these 4 teams is probably going to end up winning the Super Bowl is kind of the vibe I'm getting so far. These are the clear top 4 teams in the NFL so far. And number 4, rising 2 spots, we're going to have the Philadelphia Eagles. I do think they've clearly seemed to have lost a little bit of that scary factor. I think that they had with Shane Steichen, who's done a pretty good job at Indy thus far. But they still have so much talent on this team, like top to bottom. They just have so much talent. And so, they're just going to be able to move the ball and produce and win. But I don't think this offense is quite as scary as what it was last year. But, this defensive line is terrifying. I think you could have 16 offensive linemen and you're still not going to be able to fully, block them or anything. So it's a scary team who I think doesn't quite have the venom that they did last year, but is definitely a team I think is going to be a threat in the NFC playoff picture. And then number 3, rising a spot, the Miami Dolphins. This offense has looked insane. In our AFC prediction, I said the Dolphins were the best team in the AFC East. I said Tyreek Hill will win Offensive Player of the Year, and Mike McDaniel will win Coach of the Year. And as of right now, I think those are aging like wine. Like those predictions look good. And this team's, I was higher on the Dolphins, and this team has even surpassed my expectations. And this defense still has Jalen Ramsey waiting to come back and play. So I'm super excited for what this Dolphins offense and team could look like as we get in December with the healthy Jalen Ramsey. Because, it's fun to watch. This has been a super fun team to watch. To the number 2, rising a spot, Kansas City Chiefs. What have the Chiefs showed you in the last 2 weeks?
They've come back to show that, they deserve to be in this spot. Obviously, them moving up is just the Cowboys dropping, and they're continuing to do what they do best, and that's just play great football. Offensively and defensively, getting those key pieces back. Obviously, Kelsey and Chris Jones is helping them.
And Taylor Swift. I forgot. Having her on your side is unbeatable, honestly. Having such a pop star as a fan, you kind of want to play good for her, But still, they played great football. Yes, it was against a crap team, but they did exactly what they do against a crap team. Beat them. They're simple than that. They played so well that Mahomes didn't even have to play the fourth quarter. That's what you want when you play against these bottom teams, not to lose 28-16 Cowboys. So they did what they had to, and they won the game. It's plain and simple. I'm really excited to see how this team progresses throughout the year. Yeah, no, it's a scary team. You have Mahomes and you have Kelsey. You're going to be fine. But then this defense has underrated, been a top 5-ish, 10-ish unit. They've been really good. And you're it's a scary roster. They're probably the best team in the AFC right now. If you want to say the Dolphins are the best team in the AFC, I wouldn't disagree with you, but I'm going to err on the side of Patrick Mahomes until proven otherwise. But yeah, they're looking like the Kansas City Chiefs that we're used to. So that means number 1, still not dropping the San Francisco 49ers. I mean, have they showed any flaws yet, do you think?
No, not at all. Even with losing Brandon Ayuk, I mean, he's a solid number 2 wide receiver. They still looked amazing. Like, all around, in my opinion, the most complete looking team, going from roster and coach combination, the best in the league right now. Because there are some rosters that are better, but are not getting coached as well. But like Kyle Shanahan, you cannot deny that he needs this. This team being this way, this is their year, in my opinion. I need a revise of who I want to win the Super Bowl, because the way they're playing right now, they only see one thing in sight, and that's the championship.
Yeah, I think at the very worst, Kyle Shanahan is the second best coach in the league. This defense is still insane. All the playmakers, this offense is insane. And I don't think any team in the NFL has played as good 12 quarters as the San Francisco 49ers have. Like, they've just, they've dropped 30 every week, and the defense has, been solid. Like, it's just until proven otherwise, this is the best team in the NFL. And they've given us 3 weeks in a row of being the best team. And who knows if anyone's going to be able to topple that. We both had them winning the NFC. And who knows? I think they could win the Super Bowl. Before the season, I placed 3 bets on teams to win the Super Bowl. It was Jets, Bengals, 49ers. Obviously, one of those bets is trash now, but I think the 49ers are definitely en route to be that team to win it. But overall, that is our power rankings and kind of recap from a very wild week 3 of NFL football. So let us know kind of where you agree with us. What team did we rank too high? Why were we too low on your favorite NFL team? Just go ahead and let us know. If you stuck around for this long, please go ahead and like. Before we get out of here, is there anything you want to add in?
All good.
Perfect. All right. Well, very soon, coming up tomorrow, we'll be unveiling a new series of ours, so please stick around for that. If you stayed around for this long, thank you for watching.